join in. So hi everybody, and welcome to today's workshop at Product School in partnership with ThoughtSpot. For those of you who are not familiar with Product School, could you go to the next slide, please? For those who are not familiar with Product School, we are the global leader in product management training and have the largest PM community in the world. We host up to 4 free events every day, as well as conferences and career fairs. For more information, you can visit our site at www.productschool.com. Next slide. So at Product School, we provide PM certifications depending on your current product management level. PMC helps professionals break into the world of product management. PLC further upskills existing product leaders, and PEC focuses on perfecting skills on those already accomplished product executives. Next slide. So some quick housekeeping. To get the most out of the workshop, please participate as much as you can. Don't be shy. Turn on your camera, get stuck in. We love hearing from everybody. And when not speaking, please do keep yourselves on mute. If somebody has a noisy microphone, we will mute them, so don't take that into offense. And as a disclaimer, the event will be recorded. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Ken, who will be our workshop facilitator today. So Ken, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to speak here today. Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Rudin, and I lead the growth function at ThoughtSpot. We are a SaaS company that offers a cloud-based analytics solution for the modern analytics cloud. And I got my start in looking into product-led growth about 10 years ago. When I was working at Facebook, I led the global analytics function at Facebook, and we were part of the growth team there. So I rolled up directly to the person who led all of growth for Facebook. And Facebook was really one of the first that kind of made product-led growth into a real science. And so I learned a lot there about how to use the product to drive acquisition of users and how to drive engagement of users. But then I went to Google after that, and I led their global growth function. And the main task that I focused on was how do we take those skills and those learnings and those principles from places like Facebook and others who were doing product-led growth mostly for consumer apps, and can we apply that to enterprise apps? So the main 2 apps I focused on for most of my time there were Google Ads and Google Cloud. So they're 2 big enterprise apps. Now, they had historically been traditional B2B sales models for those products where they had a sales team that would target different companies and do pipeline generation and so on, and engage them and go through many steps. And the thing that I focused on was helping to transform that to a product-led growth model where the product itself was helping to acquire new users and the product itself was driving engagement. And so the salespeople could be much more highly leveraged. Instead of having to do all of the work, we could have the product do that work, do a lot of the heavy lifting, so they could really focus on building the relationship with the customer and identifying use cases and so on, without having to go through the basics of, so what does your product do and how does it work? Then after about 5 or 6 years doing that, and it was really successful, we were able to really turn both those products into very strong product-led growth, billion-dollar enterprises within Google. I then joined ThoughtSpot, which is also an enterprise software company, and we have historically been traditional B2B sales. And my task over the last year and a half is how do we transform our company into using what I've learned at Facebook and what I've learned at Google, how do we transform into a product-led growth company? So there's a lot of lessons that we've learned along the way about how to do product-led growth. And one of the main things that we learned is that there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about what product-led growth is really about. And I'm going to focus on what those are and how you kind of go around doing myth busting so you can actually be successful and not let those myths and misconceptions get in your way. So to start, let me define what I'm talking about when I refer to product-led growth, or PLG. Since it's very popular now, lots of different definitions out there. They're all somewhat similar, but figured I'd give you my definition just so we have some framework for what I'll be talking about. And for me, product-led growth isn't really a product strategy. It's not about just adding a free trial. And it's not just about changing the product itself, though that is a core part of it. It's really an overall company strategy that the sales team gets involved with, your customer success team gets involved with, finance gets involved with. It's a full company strategy of how are you going to sell your product in the most efficient way possible. And some of the benefits of that are that the customer acquisition cost becomes a lot lower. I can now open up the top of my funnel to anyone, if I have a free trial, for example, to anyone who wants to try the product, and only have sales talk to those who have reached certain milestones in the product. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. It also accelerates my sales cycle because when I reach out to somebody, typically they've already tried the product and have learned a bit about it. So now when sales reaches out to them, they're answering kind of the final questions that, hey, I like the product. I see it can do X, Y, and Z. Can it also do A, B, and C? I didn't see how to do that. So our sales cycle in my company went from an average 5.5 months to now we are doing many deals each quarter in under 30 days. And our average is well under 3 months. It's like closer to 2.5 months now. And we're still in our journey. We have by no means finished. I guess you're never really finished becoming a PLG company. There's always more you can do. But just in the last 1.5 years, we've seen significant changes in our sales cycle. It also makes the product a better experience because you're building the product to guide users to those things that are going to make them successful. So it's not about adding more and more functionality to the product. You change your focus a bit to how do we make sure that people can use the functionality that's already there. That's a critical part to product-led growth. So you can help drive engagement and so on with the product, not just keep adding more and more features. So overall, it really becomes this foundation for sustained growth at the lowest cost possible. So with that in mind, I said there were some myths. So these are the 4 myths that I'd like to go through. The first one that you hear a lot is, hey, PLG, product-led growth, sounds great, but that won't work for my company. Our product is too complicated. It's for other people, but it would never work for us. The second myth you hear that really holds people back is that, oh, well, my understanding of product-led growth is that the whole thing is automated. So people can go in, self-service, try the product, buy the product. They can get support through communities and so on. So we'll end up automating our sales and customer success teams. It's just not true. A third one is for people who do say, well, we're going to go do it. We're going to become a product-led growth company. They start thinking about, we need a free trial. And it's not always true, but it's often what people do. But they say, we need a free trial and we're so proud of our product. We're going to put everything we can into the free trial because that's really, showing the depth and the breadth of our product. That's really what's going to convince people to buy. That's a misconception and it doesn't work. And the last one is PLG. Really, it's our best strategy for acquiring customers at a low cost. So we should put all of our resources, when we're thinking about PLG, focus all of the resources on how do we make customer acquisition easier and easier. It is much broader than that. So let me dive into each of these, and I'll start with a framework of how we're going to kind of dismiss and dispel those myths. The framework that I'll use when we dive into these is these 3 steps. First, you kind of have to just change your mindset. Yeah, you need to think differently about it. And I'll give you some points about and some examples of how we've had to change our mind, and examples, through other companies as well. And then when you have a different mindset, that leads you to think differently about the product. So you end up making changes to the product. And once you've made changes to the product, that also then leads to some related changes to your internal processes as well. So that's what I'll be structuring when I go through these myths. So let's start with the first one, that my company can't be a PLG company. And one of the things I'd like to do is start by asking you, the people who are in this seminar at this point, asking you, put in chat if you can, what are the one or two things that you think are the most common reasons that people feel that, hey, product-led growth doesn't apply to our company? So, I'd love to see if anyone has any suggestions here. Just type in something, and I'd like to see it also, like, if you're trying to move to PLG, are these things that you are running into? So great, I see you. You have to be a SaaS company to be product-led growth, and that's a really interesting one. Yes, and that you hear that a lot. And we're not a product company; we deal in service or customer, or custom offerings, and so we can't be product-led growth there as well. It's only for B2C, right? So leadership not being flexible enough, yeah, because it's a lot of change, exactly, and the product is too complex. Yeah, that's one of the big ones. So here are some of the ones. So thank you. This is exactly the kind of answers or issues that people raise when they start talking about, hey, should we be focusing on a PLG strategy? And by the way, one of the things that you hear a lot is that all the product-led growth success stories you hear about they tend to be from companies that started that way from day one. And there are far fewer examples of companies that started in some different business model and then transitioned to product-led growth. But just because there are fewer examples doesn't mean it can't be done. It absolutely can be done. So one of the underlying goals of putting together this presentation is so in the future, you can all have your success stories of how you successfully moved to a PLG model, if that's something that you're considering doing. So it won't just be, hey, we didn't start that way, it's going to be too hard to shift. You can shift, you can do it. We've done it. We did it at Google. We're doing it at my company. And it definitely works. So just some of the things that we hear the most, if you look in the thought bubbles here, you hear things like, hey, it's only really for companies where every customer is pretty much wanting the same thing. They've got to be kind of cookie cutter. And in our case, they are so different that we can't have this kind of self-service online system because each one wants something different. So how do you possibly make a system that can satisfy all those different needs? Or my product is really complex. There's no way you can have people set it up self-service. We really need to work with them. Professional services or customer success needs to be sitting with them to understand their needs and model out some things that can be complex. Or, hey, big companies don't buy PLG. They want to buy the traditional way. Only small companies will buy from a product-led growth model, which is absolutely wrong. So all of these issues, they are just myths. And the reality is any company can become PLG because PLG is not binary. It's not you either are or you are not. It is completely a spectrum. The goal is to become more PLG. You never actually get there because I don't even know what that is. You'd have to be perfect in everything. You can always reduce friction in your sales process. You can always reduce the time to value for new users. You can always add more transparency to pricing models and so on. You can always accelerate your customer acquisition process or your new user, accelerate your new user activation process. You can always get better at that no matter what company you are. So I wanted to take something that is about as far from a SaaS company. Somebody commented that, they think that, or the myth is that you have to be a SaaS company, which is the automotive industry. So Tesla has done a really good job adding PLG components to their business model. And fun fact, about 8 years ago, I talked at Tesla's headquarters about using product-led growth because they were already in this and they wanted to hear more about it. And I remember the first time thinking, wow, this is really out there that they want to use. I was working at Facebook at the time, and they wanted to apply, some of the strategies from Facebook to drive the growth of selling cars. It was really fascinating. But if you see what they've done, let's take the standard model, which is you go to a car lot. You choose from the cars that are on the lot, pretty much. So you kind of take what's there. Then you have to go talk to a salesperson and go through this uncomfortable negotiation where you don't really know what you're going to end up paying, and you have to negotiate, and it takes forever, and it's really an uncomfortable, unpleasant process. What Tesla says, why do we need to do that? So they have rethought the whole purchasing process end to end. You go online, you can see every option they have in the car. You design exactly what you want. So you're not limited to what's on a current lot. You can design exactly what you want. It shows you the exact cost you're going to pay for each option you choose. And there's no negotiation at the end. It's just, we've been very transparent. This is what you're going to pay. Do you want to pay it? And in the early days, they used to even deliver the car to your home if you lived somewhere near a dealership. So they just made the process as simple as possible. So they were one of the first where you could go on, configure, and buy a car exactly to your specs. And then they would tell you how long it's going to take until it's getting delivered. So they have applied really well these processes of becoming more PLG, even for something as traditional as the automotive industry. And in my company's example, we are an analytics company, which means, you have to set up the model of what your data looks like before you can start analyzing it. So when we started thinking about becoming a product-led growth company ourselves, I was like, how do you make that process simple? I mean, you've got to define all these different tables coming from some database and how they're joined together, and what are your metrics and what are your attributes, and it's pretty complicated. How are we supposed to make this something that they can easily do in a self-service fashion? And I think the breakthrough moment from us is, well, it's complicated if you want to model out their entire business. That can take a long time. But what if we just say, pick 4 or 5 tables that you're interested in, because we just want to show you what our product can do. We're not trying to solve all your business problems in a free trial. What we're trying to do is get you to experience what the product is like. So we went from a process where before we were a product-led growth company, it took us a minimum of 4 weeks to get things set up till the time when they can actually do their first analysis in our product. It was 4 to 6 weeks easily, if not more. And now, because we said, look, all we want to do is it's this simple 3-step process where you connect to a data source, you choose 5 tables, and because it's only 5 tables, we can do a really good job of guessing how they're supposed to be connected. So we build a really simple model behind the scenes for you, and then you start doing your own analyses. And we've gone from 4 to 6 weeks to now we can go, we call it from 0 to query, or in our case, we do searches rather than queries, but regardless, it's basically 0 to analysis in 30 minutes. And I think we've done, we've been successful in cutting it down from what it was before, many weeks, to now we can get people to get their first experience on their own data in about 30 minutes. So that was a huge mindset change for us. that yes, it can be a complicated product. Analytics can be complicated, but you can also think about it in a very simple fashion. So that was a big breakthrough for us. But once you have that mindset change, then you want to focus on the product change. So where are you on that? And the traditional model for companies is that they focus their product team on launches. So how do we launch more and more and more features? The mindset that you need and the product changes that come with it for PLG is much more about what I refer to as landings. You've launched all these features, but you want to make sure that they land with the customers, that they actually get the value that you put into it. And so what you will find is that your focus goes from entirely on building new features to something much more about increasing engagement with and making the existing features you've got much easier to use. So the analogy would be, let's say you have this feature in the product and it's a little bit of a rusty old knife here. And the traditional model is, how do we make this better? Let's add more and more and more capabilities. But so many of these additional features you've added are only going to be used by a tiny fraction of people. The product-led growth notion is, hey, let's take that knife that we have and just make it a better pocket knife that opens more easily, that's easier to hold, more comfortable to hold, and safer to close without cutting my fingers. And that is a mindset change that leads to these product changes where you iterate on existing features rather than always adding new features. I'm not saying you don't add new features, you certainly do, but your focus is now not just on adding new features. It's about spending a lot of time iterating on existing ones, particularly your main ones that everybody is using. So once you have that as a product change where you're iterating on these features that you already have, that leads to some process changes. And the primary change is what I was talking about, the iterating quickly. And you're going from a traditional model that we had and that we had at Google as well, where we had product launches, and I'll equate that to catching an airplane. We had these product launches every few months, and we knew exactly what features were going to be in it because we had scheduled all that. It's a lot like getting on an airplane, where the airplane knows exactly who has bought a ticket for that flight. They know exactly when that flight is leaving. But because there's a lot of work coordinating all that, there's also infrequent flights, maybe a few a day, rather than, every 30 minutes. So that's the traditional product model as well, where you have a release, you schedule it, you know exactly what features are going to be in that release, like what passengers will be on that plane. But all that coordination takes effort. So you release, in our case, we released 4 times a year because of all of that. The model in PLG, because you need to iterate quickly, is much more catching a train, where these trains come all the time, every 15 minutes. You don't exactly know which train the feature you're working on, if you're in the product team, is going to be on. But basically, when your feature is ready and it's been tested, you catch the next train. So the potential downside is you don't know exactly when the feature is going to come out. But the benefit is, since these trains are coming every 15 minutes, and in our case, it's every week. We have a launch every week. If you miss a release, it's not like you have to wait 3 months until the next release. If you miss a release, you wait 7 days to catch the next release. So it lets you iterate much faster, but it means you have to change the process from knowing exactly what's going to be in each release to something that's a lot more fluid and iterative. So, and by the way, if you have questions, I'll keep monitoring the chat as well. I'll try and answer those as well. I'll look over at the chat every once in a while. That was the first myth. The second one that holds people back from getting into the mode of, I want to be a PLG company, is that there's the misconception that sales and customer service will become completely automated. And as you can imagine, that doesn't sit very well with the sales and customer service team. and they justifiably say that, our roles can't be fully automated. You guys are crazy. This is never going to work. They are right in the sense that their roles can't necessarily be fully automated. But that doesn't mean, as I said, it's a spectrum. It doesn't mean that you can't still become a PLG company and make things a lot simpler. So another question that I'd love your input on, if you are a full PLG company, you can think of some that are out there, like I think Slack is a pretty good example. Atlassian is a classic example of these B2B companies. What is the role? What does sales do in a PLG company? If the notion is, hey, it's product-led growth, what does a salesperson do? And if anyone wants to type something in, or B2B lead gen, okay, yep, that's certainly, that could be part of it. Anyone have any other thoughts about what a salesperson can do? Like, are they actually doing sales? Are they closing deals? Or no, you let the product do that? Yeah, okay, great. Like expanding the deal across the org, right? Exactly. And free to focus on larger accounts or growing existing accounts. Yes, yes, yes. Looking at new opportunities. Yes. Upsells. Exactly. Yes. So there is plenty to do for sales and assisting users through the funnel. Yes. All of these things. So if you are in sales, or you are not in sales and you're getting pushback from sales, actually the benefit is, the way I say it is that we are not going to automate their roles. What we're going to do is leverage the hell out of them so that they can be much more successful. We're going to give them more leads to work with who are much more qualified because they're much further down the pipeline before they even talk to them. So the notion is leveraging them dramatically. Instead of like a traditional funnel on the left where you have some pipeline generation, you got marketing doing that, and a few make it through. The notion is, particularly with something like a free trial, this is one of the main ways people do this. With a free trial, I can now open this up to anybody in the world who wants to try the product. Before, with a typical sales model, really, if you wanted to have a prospect and engage with them, or if you wanted to have a prospect look at your product, you had to assign sales or customer service or sales engineering. You had to assign some resources to them. So the number of people you had in the top of the funnel, the number of prospects you had, was limited by the size of your field organization, because it wasn't self-service. So you always had to have somebody there with them. With a free trial, you can open it up to anybody who wants. So you're no longer limited by the size of your sales team. You can get huge number of prospects. And out the bottom, and we'll get into this in a little bit, you get more qualified leads. You look at who has hit certain thresholds of using your product, either engagement levels or they've hit certain milestones. What you get out the bottom now is you wait until all of these people, you get potentially a lot of noise coming in too. Because it's open to anybody, so you can get people who are just tire kickers, or they're high school students who are just interested, or whatever it may be, but people aren't going to be real customers. But you look at who's actually using the product, and you can see, what's going on, and then you can then choose to engage with those who are active. And as someone said, help walk them through the rest of the process. Help make sure that they have identified not just maybe one use case, but multiple use cases across the organization, and help close that deal. And once the deal is closed, then they can go back and make sure, hey, you're already using it. Have you thought about using it in other areas? So sales, their lives become a lot more productive in a PLG model. They don't have to spend all their time in an initial meeting focusing on, so let me tell you about my product. Let me tell you what it does. Let me tell you why it's differentiated. The product can do that. In the onboarding process, the product can show you, and in a free trial, if you choose to have one, it can show you what the product does and why it's different, and highlight the key features, so that by the time sales talks to them, they're not talking about what does your product do, why should I care? It's I like your product. I have done A, B, and C with it. what I haven't been able to figure out is, can it also do X, Y, and Z? So they're getting much more specific and detailed questions. And that's why our sales cycles are so much shorter, because they already come into our sales process, or, talking to a salesperson, much more knowledgeable. And so 2 questions ago, I'm going to look at the chat here. 2 questions regarding myth 1 and myth 2. When you can't predict which how do you know as to when their asks are fulfilled? Right. Well, we do it by quarter. So it actually turns out to not be much worse than, or much different, I should say, possibly even better than the old model, where we would release once a quarter. Here it's I don't know which release it's going to be, but if I have a release every week, and I think it's going to be in July, if I'm in August, okay, I missed a little bit, but I can still give them roughly which quarter it's going to be in. And even better compared to the old model, which was you had a release once a quarter. So if you missed that release, the feature that missed isn't going to come out for 3 months later. Here, if you miss a release, and even if I say, oh, it'll be out in Q2, end of Q2, and we miss that, it can still come out, second week in Q3. So it turns out to actually work out reasonably well. But it is definitely a friction point, because you don't have a guaranteed release date. So, that's the cost. The benefit is the flexibility and the ability to iterate much faster. But you're right, it does create some friction. And it looks like PLG does not apply to larger enterprise customers, but more effective for mid-market. I would not say that that's true. I think in our case, we want to make sure all of our customers, whether we're selling to Fortune 500 or a new startup, we want to make sure they all go through the free trial, because that's the best way to get them set up to understand. It's our best selling tool. So why wouldn't we use our best selling tool with our most important customers? Now, with that said, when it is a Procter & Gamble or a United Airlines or Bank of America, or one of those customers that we work with, we do have a salesperson who gets alerted that, hey, we've got Bank of America working in a free trial. We want you to work with them. And also in the case where they're reaching out to their own contacts in some other big Fortune 500 company that we don't yet have as a customer, they'll reach out to someone. But one of the first things they'll do is say, hey, I'd love to talk to you more about this, but rather than talk, why don't I set you up with a free trial and have you go through that? And we'll touch base every 3 days so I can answer questions and help guide you through next steps. Again, we think of it as our best selling tool, so we should use it in every example that we've got. Okay, moving on here. So if you've got the mindset change about sellers, what about the mindset change for customer success? Because their job is to help people, once they've bought the product, become successful. And now you have this issue of, well, okay, but every person has a different set of data that they want to analyze in my case. Or for Google Cloud, they're all trying to build different applications, and they may need different features and subsets of feature sets within the product to use. So I don't really see how we can do that in a kind of standardized, self-service, automated-ish fashion. We need somebody to go in and understand what their needs are, and then use our own intelligence to help figure out what that solution should be. Really, the mindset you want to change is, okay, great. If you want to do that, how are you going to scale the company? Because you would have to have these people working with these customer success teams, working with every customer. So the problem is, what about the customers that you can't work with? Your smaller mid-market customers. Do you just leave them to flounder and hopefully they'll make it on their own? You have to change the mindset of what the customer success team thinks of as, and I'll use this analogy here. Imagine you're on vacation skiing at a great European ski resort, and you want to have the best experience. So you hire a personal ski guide for the day. And this guide helps you have a great experience because they know all the trails. They can see your skiing style and tell you what trails will be best for you. They know where the best snow is that day. They know how to avoid the lift lines. You will have a great experience. But there's only a limited number of these ski guides. So what about everyone else on the mountain? They kind of have to guess. You want to change the mindset of customer success to, it's not about just helping a few customers that you can work with hand in hand. It's about how do you build into the product the knowledge you have, because if you talk to any customer success team, they always have here are the 10 steps to get started, right? They have that as a PDF. And they have templates for different kinds of companies and different kinds of industries they may be in. The notion is take all you've learned and as much as possible, put that knowledge into the app. So the analogy, using the ski analogy here, would be their job would be to help create a ski app that you tell it what type of skier you are, and it tells you what the best runs are, and it shows you the snow conditions that day, and it tells you the current length of the lift line so you can choose where to go. Now, with that said, that's not their only job. They will still be working with some of your high-end customers who still want that concierge service and somebody working with them day to day. So they will absolutely still be doing that. But not only will they be helping those customers, but part of their goal is to learn and find patterns of what is helping people be successful that I can kind of make generic and put into the product. If you have here are the 10 steps to get started, it shouldn't be a PDF. It should be something in the product that guides you through those 10 steps. So with that mindset change, the product changes that come with it are what I'm showing here. The first thing is you have to invest in analytics. I'm not saying that to be self-service. I did that when I was at Facebook. I ran the analytics function there, and I did that when I was at Google too. You have to track what people are using, because the goal is you want to make the product as self-service as possible. So you use analytics to really look for three primary things. One, what are the things that people are using that correlate with success? What features are they using? What is the golden path, if you will, about people who do A, B, and C in that order? Those events tend to be more successful than people who do other things. So that's the first thing. The second thing you look for is where are they getting stuck and dropping out? And where are we losing them? Where they abandon the product? And then the third thing is, what patterns are we seeing that, hey, 30% of our customers are doing this thing? Then what you do is, with those three insights, those are your first ones that I would focus on. There's many, many more, but those are the big three that I would focus on initially. For the first two, about what people are doing that works well and what people are doing where they get stuck, build in-app guides. They can be these walk-me's, they can be pop-ups using a tool like Pendo, for example. They can be things you build yourself. They can be little 3-step wizards like the one we built that guides people through the process of doing things well. So everyone follows those same steps. In terms of the things that aren't working well, that's where you go in and you figure out, if people keep getting stuck on step 3, what can we do of a multi-step process? What can we do? Well, first of all, do we even need step 3? Can we just remove it? Is it adding much value? And if we do need it, what can we do to just make it a lot more clear, a lot simpler? So those are the first two things about what's working and what's not working. Those are guides and fixing the product. The other one about patterns that you're seeing in the product. This is where templates become really important. Like in our case, we saw that a lot of our customers were connecting to 2 data sources or data from 2 different applications. One was ServiceNow and one was Salesforce. So people were doing analysis on that data. They had that data in a warehouse somewhere because they were trying to do analysis on it, and they wanted a tool to make it easier. So without a template, people have to go through and build a little bit of the model, and then they aren't exactly sure what they should be looking at. So they build these dashboards that we call live boards. They build these dashboards to show them a couple things, but they're not really sure where do the best insights really come from. What you can do with templates is, make it a lot faster for them to get set up, because they just have to customize, oh, I'm looking for a field name for product ID and you call it prod ID instead of product ID. Okay, great. Just let me know that. Everything else will work. And so you make it a lot simpler. Plus, they get more value out of it because they may not know that in a sales pipeline, you don't want to just look at what percentage of your deals are in what stages of a pipeline. You also want to look at how long have those deals been in each stage, because a lot of those deals may be in step 5 out of 6. And you're like, oh, it's looking really good. But if those deals have been in that stage 180 days or more, really, you need to know that, because really you've lost those deals. You just haven't admitted it to yourself. If they haven't moved in 6 months and you're still putting them in your pipeline, you need to take them out because they're not real deals anymore. So these templates help give you, help accelerate adoption. They help them get more value out of it. And a third thing that they help do is introduce your users to other ways they could be using the product. So let's say somebody is using a template for doing analytics on Salesforce or ServiceNow. If we have a template in there about financial analytics or from analytics on HubSpot, or some marketing tool, then it can spark their curiosity about, oh, I wonder if we could use this for that as well. So it's a great way to expand usage. And if you've looked at a lot of the modern tools out there, like one that we use all the time internally is for design work and visual collaboration is Miro. And I'm only mentioning this because they've done a great job they have tons of templates. It's basically a digital whiteboard. They have tons of templates of, oh, you could use it for doing meeting polls. You could use it for brainstorming. You could use it for product planning. You could use it for doing user studies. And they have all these templates that are pre-built to give you all these ideas about how you could use this more. And that's just a great example of the product being the best tool you have of driving increased engagement, right? You have in the product ways to get people interested in using it different ways. I'm looking at a question here. What challenges do you face in PLG when the user is in when the user in the funnel is not the buyer? That's an excellent question. And I can just tell you like that's one of the big challenges we have, that we'll have a business user who will sign up for the free trial, and they can get through it pretty well, but the business user generally isn't the one who's going to buy it. It's somebody who's in the data team and the analytics team. So in our case, and generally the approach to this is the ability to invite the buyer into the funnel with them. So like the specific example in our case is if they get to a point where they've created a dashboard, they can then share that with an analyst saying, hey, I just did this. I'd love you to take a look. And then that sharing process creates them as a user in the system. They get this email, they can come in. So the goal is to figure out if the person in the funnel is liking it, but they're not the buyer. How can they use the tool itself to build support? Can they get other people to use it and build a groundswell? Or can they get the buyer to actually use it if it's a case where the buyer would be a direct user of it? So it's figuring out how the product can build its own case, right? How you can use the product to build momentum internally so the buyer will use it. There's examples of like Tableau, another product in the analytics space. They did a great job historically of having this kind of small version of the product that you could buy. And so individuals would just buy it for themselves, but the data team wouldn't know much about it. The sales team at that company would then call on the data leader and say, because it had spread so virally within the company, and said, you already have 50 people in your company using it. Can I talk to you about buying a license so you can, control all that and get a better deal and so on. So there are lots of approaches, but basically it's thinking about how can you use the product to help build the case, right? Either everybody's already using it, so there's almost no choice, you have to buy it, or get the buyer to experience it themselves are two of the most common ones. So hopefully I answered your question there. And the process change that goes along with this about, sales and customer success, once we've realized that we can actually leverage them even more in a product. It's not about automating them, it's about leveraging them even more. You end up figuring out what processes can you change using the product to further leverage them. So here's just two examples, and this is what we did in my company, but we also did this in Google. Lots of other companies. I've talked to people at other companies who've had something very, very similar. But there's this notion of a marketing qualified lead, which is where most people start, and that's when the timeline I have here, like they clicked a lead, they downloaded a white paper, they attended a seminar or a webinar, or they subscribed to a blog, something like that. And then as soon as they've done a few of these things, then you're like, great, this is a hot lead. Let's get sales involved. And sales reaches out to them. What at that point is that the user, that prospect, is interested in your industry. You don't really know if they're interested in your product. We've changed that. Well, we still have marketing qualified leads, but we have added to it a much more powerful signal, which is the product qualified lead, where we're now looking at what behaviors are users doing in our free trial. So we see, well, they signed up, did they ever log in? And did they connect to a data source? Have they created some charts and graphs? Have they put them on one of our live boards? Have they then shared that with someone? You essentially get, for each one of those milestones that you reach, you get a certain number of points essentially behind the scenes. And once the total number of points exceeds a threshold, we refer to that as this person is now a product qualified lead, and then sales gets alerted. Now, as a sales rep, would you rather have somebody who's already used the product and gotten pretty far, or someone who's downloaded a white paper and attended a seminar? The signal strength between these two is significant. So the process of focusing on introducing product qualified leads into your company has been key to success at so many companies that have done this. So let's see. I'm going to move on. I see there are a couple of questions. I'll move on to myth number 3, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions as well. Is that there's this misconception that, look, okay, we're going to go ahead. We've gotten past those first 2 myths. We're going to go ahead and become a PLG company, and we're going to build a free trial because we're so proud of how much our product can do. We're going to show them everything. So, quick question. What are the goals of a free trial? If you had to state what the goals are, if you guys been doing great before with some suggestions, if you could type in chat again, I'd love to hear what you think the goals are. And there's no right or wrong answer, but I will definitely share my opinion. What do you think are some of the goals of a free trial? Why do you have one? And how do you know it's successful? So, right, get the user to value and fast. Okay, great. To test and learn. Great. And test drive to see if the benefits will work. Okay, right. Get the user excited about the product and measure conversions. Okay, I definitely like that one. I like all of these, but engagement. Yeah, so there are, thank you for those. There are a lot of different things that you could have it for. In my experience, the goal of the purpose of the free trial is to get them to what are known as aha moments, as many aha moments as quickly as possible. It is not about teaching them everything your product can do. If you try to teach them everything your product can do, you will find that A, they get overwhelmed, and B, nothing really sticks. They learn so many things that they don't really have a takeaway as to what your product is about. So what you want to do instead is figure out what are the 2 or 3 things that, they're called aha moments because somebody uses them and they're like, aha, now I see why this product is valuable or different or fun or useful or whatever it may be. So you want to identify what those are and get people to them as quickly as possible. So the example would be, let's say you own a restaurant and you're trying to get people to be repeat patrons of your restaurant. you could show them your entire menu. That's one way, just like stand out on the street and say, here's our menu, here's our menu, here's our menu to anybody who walks by. Or you could say, you know what, come on in. I will give you a free trial of one of my 2 best signature dishes. So you can see the ambiance of the restaurant and you'll get to taste one of my dishes. Which one do you think is going to have more impact? I just read a whole list. I don't even remember what I read, and I don't even know which ones are your specialties. Or I went in and they gave me just a 2-bite sample of their 2 best dishes, right? That is the best way to get them like, I got to come back here. So yes, the latter, exactly. So think of your free trial as what are your 2 best dishes that you want to give them a sample of. And in our case, I'll just use an example here of our product. Our aha moment is when they get to do an analysis on their own data using what we call a search. And you can see they're typing stuff here. It looks like a Google search box, and they don't have to know SQL. So they can just type in these simple things. And so our goal is how do we don't want to show them all the different complex analyses or every type of chart that we can create or all the security admin functionality that we have. We focus on how do we get them to be able to type into a search box and get a chart as a result on their own data, not demo data, on their own data as fast as possible. That's really what our free trial does. And in fact, to try and keep them focused on that, we have even kind of turned off some of the other functionality, at least in the early phases, so they don't get distracted and go deep into all the admin functionality early on. We want to get them, as someone said, excited by, wow, I've never done something like this. So if they just stopped here, at least they, this is one of the first things, they would at least know what makes your product different and what is special about it. So figure out what that is for your product. What are the aha moments? And the last thing about this is the process change. If we have this as a product change that we're going to focus on just getting you to these aha moments as quickly as possible, is you start thinking not just about that process itself, but everything that leads up to it and how to make those processes simpler as well. So like our onboarding process today, this is a work in progress for us, but today our onboarding process takes follows these 6 steps you see here. They fill out a form to register for the free trial. They submit it. We send them an email. They have to find it, open it, click on a link, which brings them back into the product. They have to create a password, and then they enter the free trial. And I wasn't that surprised when I looked at the percentage of people who actually get to the end of this process who started it. So actually even more than that, from the people who click submit. So they've actually registered to the people who log in at least once. We found that we lose 30%. So for every 100 people that fill out the form and submit it, only 70 of them actually ever log in. Because they forget to check their email, or they check their email and get distracted, or it goes to spam, or creating password. We have some restrictions on the password, and they try the first one, and we tell them it's not secure enough, and they're like, forget it. And so this was the process we had, and this is we found that it is a painful and terrible process. So somebody said, why this process? What are the gains? I think the answer why this process is because we weren't thinking. We just built, hey, well, you have to register and sign in, and this is the traditional model. But then when the data comes back, remember I talked about analytics is core to product-led growth. The data comes back saying, you're getting people to the website to register for the process, but 30% of them are getting stuck in these other steps, which add no value. So we're changing it to just this. Where you can, instead of having to fill out a form and all this stuff, if you have a Google account, which about 70% of our users do, you'll be able to do this just with a single click. So none of these steps, it's not adding value. They'll do a single click. They don't have to fill in a form. They don't have to search their email. They click, they're in. So anyone who clicks on that 100% of them, not 70%, 100% of them get into the product. And the last thing I want to focus on is that PLG, let's not think about PLG about acquiring new customers. In the interest of time, I'll skip this part. But I'll just give the answer to the question, which is, where else does PLG play a critical role? And the answer is, we have to change our mindset. Product-led growth is not just about customer acquisition. The higher level impact in the long run comes from engagement and retention. Focusing on what you can do to keep your customers is more valuable than acquiring them. It's the notion that if you can't engage and retain your customers, then a large chunk of your acquisition is just going to backfill the people you're losing. It's like pouring more water into a leaky bucket. Figure out how to stop the leak rather than just continually pouring more water in just to make up for the parts that are leaking out. So there are several ways that you can use your product to drive engagement. And I'll just go through 3 quick examples here. One is figure out which features are correlated with, through analytics, are correlated with engagement, and introduce those features to people in context. And what I mean by in context is at a time they're likely to use it. So for those of you who've been around a while, in 1997, Microsoft introduced Clippy on the left here that would introduce features to you, usually at the worst possible time. And it was something you weren't interested in. Instead, do something where they're going to use it. Like we had this notion of adding a pit stop in our product in Google, and where if you're navigating from point A to B, you could stop for gas along the way or stop for food along the way. The best place we found to introduce that was when someone had decided that they were going to navigate. They needed to navigate on something that was over 2.5 hours long. So we wouldn't show you anything about that feature until you had a point in time when you were likely to use it. So here somebody's going to navigate 3 hours, 48 minutes. This is the time when they're most likely to want to add in a pit stop. So that's the right time to introduce that feature. Building in engagement loops also is another thing that you should focus on to drive engagement with your product. On the left, we've got Asana, where you can tag somebody in a comment. That means that that other person gets some notification about it and then is brought back into the product. So that's the loop, that somebody using it tags someone who then also uses it. They tag somebody else who also uses it, and you get this virtuous cycle going. Or, even in our product, we have this notion that you can follow a live board, which you can set that up for yourself or for others. Anytime there are changes that can cross several thresholds, like monitoring this, you can have this sent out to someone and they'll get an alert, which brings them back. So it's this notion of you go in, you do something to set up this follow, and it helps bring you back later. And then the last one I'll focus on is making sure that people are aware of the value they're getting. A lot of times, like on the left, we've got a virus checking app. Send them a note, send your users a note once a month telling them, here's what's being protected and here's how many items we've scanned. Or something like Grammarly on the right. You get these little changes, micro changes all the time, but you're not really sure in aggregate how much value you're getting. So they send you this summary of how many words they've checked and how many alerts they've shown. So you get this notion of what is the value actually being delivered if it's not immediately apparent. In a case like Virus Checker, often it's a set it and forget it app for most people, and that makes retention harder. And then the last thing I'll say is that the process change associated with this is to figure out what is your success metric for the product. We talked about analytics. Think about what is that one metric that is going to help you measure success across all these things we've talked about in PLG. It's not the only metric you care about, but it's going to be the main metric that you're going to be defining your success as you go through product-led growth. That if that metric goes up, you've been successful. So to summarize going through those 4 myths, anybody can be a PLG company. I don't care what industry you're in. And it's not something where we're trying to automate away sales and customer service. We're trying to invigorate them and do more work with them so that they can be more highly leveraged. Make sure that if you have a free trial, you're focusing on the goal of having them understand what makes your product different and better versus the breadth. And then the final thing is make sure you're not just focusing on acquisition. You get even more value if you focus on how to use the product itself to drive more engagement with the product. So hopefully you've been able to take a few take homes away from this. So, and I don't know, Andres, if we have time for some questions, but let me know, Andres. Otherwise, if we're at time, I can end here. But there were a few questions
we
here.
definitely have time for questions. And
Okay.
if you want, I can run a passive. It's a satisfaction poll for the workshop. It's going to run like passively. People get a pop up, and then we can get questions while that is going.
Great. You can put your questions in chat, and I'll just look at the chat thing here. So, do you require a corporate email for free trial? Oh, well, that's specific to my company. Yes, we do. That's because we're trying to make sure, that there's some people who are at least somewhat serious about it. And how to apply to physical products. Well, I talked a little bit about how product-led growth can be or is being applied by Tesla to a car, which is certainly a physical product. Remember, PLG is about how do we make it easier to buy, make the buying process, self-service, and have the product that we're using help engage people more, right? So when I was at Google and we were selling, I also worked with the Nest devices at Google, which are physical products. You put the thermostat in your home, you put the smoke detectors in your home, they have the doorbell. One of the product-led growth things we would do is we can't do much, you can't iterate on the product itself, but it fits into a whole ecosystem. So we would have, like, if somebody just bought one smoke detector, product-led growth is, we can send them automated emails saying, hey, it works better if you have one in each room. Or if they have a thermostat, you can, do these marketing campaigns automated that says anyone who buys a thermostat who doesn't have a smoke detectors can also be used, in the Nest case, for detecting who's in a room, if someone's in a room at all. And so you can use it to adjust the thermostat based on whether there's somebody in the room or not. So we were doing all kinds of things first of all, on the website, making it just easier to buy one in the first place, because we had a lot of people who'd start the purchase process and not finish. Definitely PLG initiatives to improve all of that. And so it's about minimizing time to value, simplifying the purchasing process, helping the customer use the product better. Like even in Teslas, every time they have a feature update, they give you a little screen that just walks you through what that feature is in the car itself, in the product itself. And I'm going to put my email here for anyone who wants. If you want to follow up with further questions, I just put my email in the chat as well. And okay, what happens when using and spreading the product within an org is dependent on getting security IT approval or assistance. This can happen in big enterprise companies with sensitive data. Yes, definitely, which is why, like, that's the case for an analytics product, that IT doesn't want just anybody pulling data from their systems without making sure that they're allowed to see that data. So we build things in to highlight what the security models are, so they can invite someone from their IT or security teams, figure out what you can do in the product to make that person more comfortable. Or even something as simple as, and I've seen this done, if you want to convince somebody, a buyer, you can even have like, hey, here are the 3 things you can show them. Like, we already have 12 people using this, and here's the estimated amount of time they're saving using this product, and on and on and on, right? So you can even have those kinds of things like, hey, here's just some information about the usage of this product and how it's helped your team that you can then share with the person who's going to be the buyer. Even that helps, right? Again, there's no one answer. It's just, how do we make it simpler and easier and more engaging and reduce the time to value? All the different ways we can think about it. That's the essence of product-led growth. And our team, okay, one last question here. Our team is thinking of first adding a free trial, even though the whole product is not ready. Is this a good idea? It depends, right? If you could, I think it could be a good idea. I think the specifics, probably have to get more into the specifics, but if you treat it as, hey, I'm going to just give you, think of the restaurant analogy I used. I'm going to just give you a sample of one of my, 2 of my signature dishes, and that's it. So you can't see the rest of it. It's just, hey, if you want to get a little taste of it, yes, you can use this product. The rest, if you're interested, then call us, right? If you want to see the rest, call us. I think that can work if done well. So I definitely think that it is worth exploring. Kind of in our case, we had something similar to that. It wasn't about the product not being ready, but we thought free trial, trying to model out your whole database structure, that's going to take a long time. That's not self-service. We explicitly said, we're going to cut it down to just pick 5, tables from your entire system that are related, and we'll just take it from there. So they get a taste of it. It's not their whole thing, but it's, so I do think that if you can position it as, this is to give you an idea of what it is, and as long as that's going to be easy and a positive experience, I think it would be valuable. And okay, I think that's about it. What about no connected internet users? I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, but if you're talking about your product is for, isn't an internet product, again, generally, I've yet to come across a product that could not benefit from following some of these PLG principles. If you think about, every product has to be sold, and every product should deliver value to the person who buys it. So if you can just think about, how do I make it easier for the customer to buy, right? Tesla put everything online, and you could just do it from, home in your pajamas if you want to. So every product has to be sold, so make it easier to buy. Every product should deliver value. Figure out what you can do to minimize time to value, right? Setting up since I worked at Google, I do have the Nest smoke detectors. Setting that up is super easy. And it's, they just made the experience elegant. And it's super simple. You tell it what room it's in. And then even things like, if there's smoke in your house somewhere, usually from, somebody forgot to turn off something like that in the kitchen, it's so much easier, right? To figure out where the alarm is coming from and to turn it off, using your phone. You don't have to get up on a ladder and press some button. So they've just made the whole experience more engaging. And I remember, I thought it was just so great that you start telling other people about it, right? When you've made the experience that engaging, even for physical products like smoke detectors, that's a product-led growth tactic. So hopefully I've been able to answer some of your questions, and hopefully you were able to get something out of this. And I put my email in the chat if you'd like to follow up. But I'm going to wrap it up here. And I just wanted to thank you for participating in this, and thank you for your feedback and your questions. I really appreciate it. Andres, is there anything you want to do to wrap up?
No, that would be everything. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining, and yeah, thank you Ken and thank you ThoughtSpot. So yeah.
All right, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.